Okay, let's start the chapter 4. Okay, in this chapter, we're gonna look at the leader as individual and what kind of leaders are there. Now, the learning objective of this is to understand the importance of self-awareness and recognize the blind spot on the leaders, identify major personality dimensions, and understand how personality influences leaderships and relationships with the organization. We're also going to clarify your instrumental and end value and recognize how value guide through value guide thought and behavior. We're also going to define the attitude, what's an attitude, and explain their relationship to leader behavior. We explain the attributes and recognize how perception affects the leaders, followers, relationship, and recognize individual differences in cognitive style and broaden your own thinking style to expand the leadership potential and understand how to lead and work with a varied personality traits. Now, what's a self-awareness? Self-awareness being conscious of the internal aspects of one natures, such as personality, traits, emotional values, attitude, and perception, and appreciating how your patterns affect other people. What's a blind spot? Blind spots is characteristics or habits that people are not aware or don't recognize as a problem, but which limit their effectiveness and hinder their career success. Now, why it's important to have a self-awareness? Usually, effective leaders know who they are and what they stand for. Allow people to know what to expect from them. People require self-reflection to avoid a blind spot that limit the effectiveness and career success. So in general, if people usually they like to see the self-reflections so they can avoid the blind spot. So personality is the set of unseen characteristics and processes that underline a relatively stable pattern of behavior in response to ideas, objective, and people in the environment. So that's how you define a personality. Now, the big five personality dimension, the five general dimensions that describe the personality, if it's extroversion, agreeableness, consciousness, emotional stabilities, and openness to experience. These are five different personalities. Now, Western extroversions is a degree to which a person is outgoing or probably sociable or talkative and comfortable meeting and talking to new people. Usually salespeople, this type of uh, personality include the characteristics of dominance, likes to be in control and influence others, self-confidence, seek position of authority, and is competitive and assertive. The agreeable person or the agreeableness is a degree to which a person is able to get along with others by being good-natured, cooperative, forgiving, compassionate, understanding, and trusting. A warm and approachable, more agreeable people are more likely to get and keep jobs. Overly agreeable people tend to be promoted less and earn less money, by the way. Then the consciousness is a degree to which a person is responsible, dependable, persistent, and achievement oriented. They are focused on a few goals, more important than extroversions for effective leadership. So they're mostly focused on a certain goals and they're after it. Then you have emotional stability personality, which is a degree to which a person is well adjusted, calm, and secure. Emotionally stable leaders can handle stress and criticism well and does not take mistakes or failure personally. Develop positive relationships, improve relationships. Leaders with a low degree of emotional stabilities can be tense, anxious, and depressed sometimes, most of the time. So these are the five. And then the last one is openness to experience, is the degree to which a person has a broad range of interests and is imaginative, creative, and willing to consider new ideas. Intellectually curious and seek a new experience. Early traveler and exposure to different idea and culture and critical to development. Important because leadership is about change. I guess now you probably can see which one you fit in these mostly. You can have more than one, but one is fits really well with you. Now, locus of control. Define whether a person plays the primary responsibility for what happens to him or her within himself or herself or on outside forces. So you blame it on you or you blame it to the outside forces. That's the locus of control, the degree of that. Now, high internal locus of control, which is internal, believe that actions determine what happened to them. High external locus of control or externals believe that outside forces determine what happened to them. Now, maximizing the leadership effectiveness, I would like you to stop and look how, if you are an extrovert or introvert, how you maximize the leadership effectiveness by polishing some of these activities and ignoring these activities. You don't need to change your personality, except you need to focus on some of these things. So if you are an extrovert, you don't need to change to introvert or vice versa, except you want to make it more. Like if you're introvert, you try to smile more now. Have a game plan, for example, practice, mix with the people, and that helps you to be, better. Now we have what you call authoritarianism, or a person with authority, lots of authority. The belief that power and status differences should exist in an organization. Each level has a different authorities and not a flat one, put it this way. Now, authoritarianism is a leader's degree of authoritarianism affect how the leader wield and share the power, how focused on authorities is, the more he is keeping the power with certain level or certain people, the more he believes in authority. High authoritarianism is a traditional and rational approach to management, autocratic style of leadership, and difference between a leader and the followers affects the leader's effectiveness. Now, what's a value and values? Values is fundamental beliefs that an individual considered to be important, that are relatively stable over time, and that have an impact on attitude and behaves. Like you have to be honest all the time. You don't lie all the time. You're a fair. All these are values. If you stick to them, you don't change them overnight. Now, instrumental and end values. These are two tools. Instrumental values is belief about the types of behavior that appropriate for reaching goals. And end values is sometimes called terminal values. These are beliefs about the kind of goals or outcome that are worth trying to pursue. There is an expression says, all the roads gets to Roma. That's end values. Your value to get to Roma, so you can get through all the routes. Now, the values, the difference and the influence. Individual differs in how they prioritize values. Identify and understand value differences to improve communication and effectiveness. Values are established by early adulthood, but can change with the time. And for leaders, value influence how they relate to others, perceive opportunities, situation, and problem, and make decisions. What the values for some leaders versus other leaders, like prophets, for example. Now, the difference in leaders and non-leaders value ranking. I'd like you to take a look at this. Here, what you see, for example, terminal values ranked higher by leaders, like a freedom, mature love, national security, salvation. On the other hand, terminal values that rank higher by non-leaders is a word at peace, pleasures, and wisdom. Values can change between the manager and the employee. They can rank things differently between. And for example, managers, if you say salary, manager thinks that the salary is the highest value. Employees think that self-fulfillment is the highest and recognition the values. Now, instrumental values rank the higher by leaders like ambitious, broad-minded, courageous, forgiving, and loyal. On the other hand, instrumental values that ranked by non-leaders is clean, helpful, independent, intellectual, logical, and self-controlled. So you see, when it comes to the instrument and uh, um, terminal values, is they are different between leaders and non-leaders. So we come back to saying, what's an attitude? Attitude is an evaluation, either positive or negative, about people, event, or things. Now, what we have something called a theory of X, or theory X, and theory of Y, or theory Y. Theory X is the assumption that people are basically lazy and not motivated to work, and that they have a natural tendency to avoid responsibility. Always X stand for bad stuff. Theory of Y, or theory Y, assumption that people do not inherently dislike work and will commit themselves willingly to work that they care about it. Now, the assumption of theory X, I'd like you to take a look at it and try to understand which this assumption came from, and then the assumption of theory Y. Now, this is the most challenging thing, is the perception. Sometimes the perceptions differs of what we, most of the time, of what we try to express. But what's a perception? Perception is the process people use to make sense out of the environment by selecting, organizing, and interpreting information. Now, perceptual distortions, perceptual defense. Now, error in the judgment that arise from inaccuracies, the perceptual process. So there is inaccuracies in perceptual. And then you have what you call the stereotyping. And this is, we're going kind of the perceptual distortions, which is the tendency to assign an individual to a broad categories and then attribute generalizations about the group to the individual. And then when you have a halo effect, and halo effect is overall impression of a person or situation based on characteristic, either favorable or non-favorable. Projection, the tendency to see one's own personal trait in other people's, and there is what you call perceptual defense, the tendency to protect oneself by disregarding ideas, situation, or people that are unpleasant for you. But we need to know what's an attributions. Attribution is the judgment about what caused the person behave that way. What causing that attribute, that either characteristic of the person or the situation. And we do that a lot. Internal attribution is the characteristics of the person led to that behavior. He's lazy, for example. We use that. He's a very smart person, something like that. The external attribution says the situation caused the person's behaviors. We can put it on the environment. Now, the fundamental attributions errors. Where is the errors causing these errors? Is the tendency to underestimate the influence of external factors on another behavior and overestimate the influence of internal factor. This is one of the attribution to the error. And then you have what you call the self-serving bias and the tendency to overestimate the influence of internal factors on one's success and the influence of external factors on one's failures. When you succeed, you say, I did that, I'm this. When you fail, somebody did that, and I had to fail. And then you have what you call the cognitive style, which is how a person perceives, process, interprets, and use the information. That's what you call a cognitive, and always not 100% match between this, the delivery and the receive. There is what you call patterns of thinking in a human, and they found out that there is a left hemisphere and there is a right hemisphere brain. And the people who use the left hemisphere, they are more logical, analytical thinking, and a line approach to the problem solving. The people who use the right hemisphere, more creative, intuitive, value-based thought process. Now, most of the females use the right hemisphere and male use the left hemisphere. The whole brain concept is an approach that considers not only a person's preference for right brain versus the left brain thinking, but it's also conceptual versus experiential thinking. Identify the four quadrants of the brain related to a different thinking so that you have the left brain versus the right brain, and that also there is an influence of conceptual versus the expression on the left or right style. And you just take a look at this and how it's get divided. The A, which is the upper left, the upper right, the lower left, and the lower right. And the lower, which is the B, A, B, C, D, and each one is based on Herman's whole brain model. Now, there is what you call a Myers-Briggs type indicator, or MBTI. Test the measures how individual differs in gathering and evaluating information for solving a problem and making decisions. The people are different when they gather and evaluate the information. Now, in the MBIT, uses different pairs of attribute to classify people in one of 16 different types, personalities. And we're not going to get deeper in that, but we know now there's an introversion versus extroversion, there's sensing versus intuition, there is thinking versus feeling, and there is judging versus perceiving. And the guideline for working with the different personality types is here. You use that, understand your own personality, what kind of a person you are, and how you react to others. Treat everyone with the respect, acknowledge each person's strength, strive for understanding, and remember that everyone wants to fit in. These are a guideline for working with a different personality type. If you use these, you're not going to go out of the whole influencing range for people. So that's the end of the chapter. Thank you very much.